This is the Bird's Eye View, and today we are going to talk about a headline that I saw because this is like an ongoing thing, and so we're going to talk about it a little bit. And that's this due process stuff with the immigrants and the due process. Apparently, on this one, it says Marco Rubio hits back at a claim that minor U.S. citizens were deported without due process. Now, so this headline, of course, it's from a left-leaning news and stuff. And basically the left is saying that the children were deported. Now, what you get is the outcry of, oh, don't separate the families. The kids have to be with their parents, and we can't separate families. Okay, you're right. We shouldn't separate families. However, if you are a parent here illegally and you are deported, then you're going home, and we can't leave your 2 or 4 or 7-year-old here in the United States. That's just not something that can be done. We're not going to put them in foster care. We're not going to do that. Why did we do that? That makes zero sense, right? Why would you put kids in foster care when they have a family? like, I don't get it. So we're going to hear Mr. Rubio here speak about this. So let's go.
About the issue of due process, that it's being violated. So let me ask you, is everyone on U.S. soil, citizens and non-citizens, entitled to due process?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so there's the easy answer, right? Is everyone on U.S. soil, citizens or non-citizen, entitled to due process? Yes, of course. Easy. That's easy, because that is what happens. Now, where people get this confused is the fact that due process looks very different for a U.S. citizen than it does a non-citizen. And immigration law, due process versus a criminal trial court are very, very different aspects of due process. They are not the same thing. So let's just get that out of the way right from the beginning. So let's just hear him talk about it.
Of course. But let me tell you, it looks in immigration standing, the laws are very specific. If you're in this country unlawfully, you have no right to be here and you must be removed. That's what the law says. Somehow over the last 20 years, we've completely lost this notion that somehow or completely adopted this idea that, yes, we have immigration laws, but once you come into our country illegally, it triggers all kinds of rights that can keep you here indefinitely. That's why we were being flooded at the border. And we've ended that, and that's why you see a historically low number of people not just trying to cross our border, trying to cross the border into Panama, all the way down in the Darien Gap. I mean, it's been a huge help for those countries as well. On the headline, that's a misleading headline.
Okay. There you go. That's a misleading headline. And it is. Because here's the simple thing about immigration law is you're picked up, right? And you're told that, hey, you're here illegally. You're being charged with a violation of immigration, which is the start of your due process. You have the right to be heard by a judge. You have the right to provide any evidence to the contrary. And then you have the right to be deported. That is your due process. So they bring you in and they say, hey, you're an illegal immigrant. Do you have any evidence to support that you are here legally? They say, well, no, I snuck across the border. They say, okay, well, you're gone. Bye. There's your due process. That is the law. That is your due process. Now, like I said, that looks very different from a U.S. citizen charged with a criminal offense, where they have, all these other rights in there as part of the due process of being tried in criminal court. But these are not the same things. And all these headlines and all these media people crying about, due process, due process, they didn't get due process. No, they did. They did. They absolutely did. In fact, the newest one with the Venezuelan gangs who are detained in Texas, there was a court order that says that they must get their habeas hearings, which is a hearing in your local district, wherever you are placed, that you can go ahead and provide the evidence to the contrary of what you're being charged with. Are you illegal? Are you here illegally? Well, yeah. Are you part of Tren de Aragua? Well, no, but I don't have any proof of that. Okay, what about the tattoos all over your body? Well, those are just tattoos. Okay, yeah, whatever. Okay. Are you over 14 years old? Yes. Okay, well, there's your due process. Bye. But what's happened there is they applied in Maine, which you can't do because your due process is where you are held, and that is in Texas. And so these people they don't even want to have the hearings because what are they going to say? I don't have any proof I'm not over 14. I don't have any proof that I'm here legally because I'm not. And I don't have any proof I'm not part of this Tren de Aragua or an associate because I have all these gang tattoos all over myself. Just like that, the dude, Abrego, whatever the hell his name is, that was deported. Even, have you seen his tattoos on his hands where his wife puts up pictures and then puts stickers all over her hands so you can't see the Tren de Aragua tattoos, the gang tattoos? It's all right. So this due process, everybody's getting their due process. Now, let's get back to this real quick. And about this 2-year-old, this 4-year-old, and this 7-year-old or something. So it says the misleading headlines: the 3 U.S. citizens aged 4, 7, and 2 were not deported. They were with their mother, who was legally deported, and the children went with their mothers. They can come back to their father or someone who wants to assume them. Ultimately, it was the mother who were here illegally. You guys make it sound like ICE kicked down the door, grabbed the children, and threw them on an airplane. It was misleading, and that's true. The mother wanted the kids to go with her. She did not want them staying here by themselves. She did not want them ended up in foster care or any of the other things. So they were not deported. They simply kept the family together, and they were sent back. Now, another part of this is the whole, well, but they're U.S. citizens, the parents can stay. And that is not the case. That is not the case at all. In fact, even with the anchor baby stuff, right, is the birth tourism, where you come here specifically just to have your kid in the United States, so they're a U.S. citizen, and then people think that the parents just get to come here and, live in the United States. And that's only partially true. Because if your child is a U.S. citizen and you do things legally, it is easier for you to get a visa to bring your kids to the United States to do things. Not to stay long term, but to do things here. And if you so choose, you can leave your U.S. citizen children with a caretaker that's here legally, but most families don't want to do it. Why would you do that? Why would you give up your kid? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so what they do is they come here and they have a baby, and then they go home. And then they can apply to come here because their kids are U.S. citizens. They can temporarily come here on visas to temporarily stay. You're not immigrating here. You're not a permanent resident, but you can bring your kids here to stay. It's easier to get a visa like that than if you're just a rando, right, with no ties to the United States. Now, after the age of 21, though, when that U.S. citizen child turns 21, they can then apply for you as a immediate family member to come here legally and immigrate to the United States legally. Which means if you're already here, you can't then apply that way because now you're here illegally and you cannot do that. That would be illegal. But that doesn't mean after the citizen child turns 21, they can't help you get a visa to immigrate to the United States, become a permanent resident, and then inside of 5 years apply for your nationalization certificate and become a naturalized citizen. But there are rules to that. But the thing is you can come here, have a kid, that kid's U.S. citizen. You most certainly can get visas to come back to visit the United States way easier than if you have no ties to the United States. And then when it comes time that your kids have gone through their schooling and got a job and they decide that they want to apply for you to come to support you in the United States, they can most certainly do that. And that's easier to get than if you're waiting on a visa, or if you're waiting on an immigration visa through the lottery system, right? The lottery system, people wait many, 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 many years, if ever, to get the visa to come here, to immigrate. But the difference is one, you kind of semi did it illegally, and then the other one is you just did it all the way legally. Now, this whole thing goes back to the point of the due process stuff. Let's just circle back all the way around. Is the due process is you being heard, that you know what you're being charged with. You have the right to provide any evidence to the contrary of what you're being charged with. And then if you can't, then you get deported, and that's your due process. So when you hear all these people spouting off about, oh, they're not getting due process, and no, they are. They absolutely are getting due process. It just doesn't look like you think it looks because it's not a criminal trial of a United States citizen. That's not what this is about. So these kids, they didn't get deported. These kids went home with their mom, who was deported. So I guess in a way you can say they got a free ride home because mom was deported. They went with their mother. Those kids can come back with a legal adult at any time they choose. With a legal adult, right? But that's the whole thing. Mom has been deported. I think she's banned now for the minimum of 10 years of returning to the United States, because if you're here illegally and you get deported, I think it's a 10-year ban. So mom can't bring the kids back until they're, 15, 16, 17 years old. When she's past that 10 years, she can apply for a visa and then come back. Dad, it doesn't say anything about where dad is, who dad is. I'm assuming dad may be a U.S. citizen or maybe here legally, but apparently he didn't want to assume that burden of having 3 kids without mom there, so he said basically go home with mom. But there's that. If he's also here illegally, it wouldn't have made any difference. He would have got deported. But from just kind of what I read here, it sounds like he may have some kind of authority to stay here, but chose not to. So mom went back to Honduras where she was deported with the kids. Dad, I guess, didn't want to take the guardian responsibility. So what other was their choice, right? Because if you split up the kids or the family and you put the kids in some kind of foster care or everything, that's like worse, right? That's what you guys were complaining about before, all the kids in cages and being separated from their families and all that other stuff. So this is kind of the best you can get, right? Dad didn't want responsibility. Mom said, no, I want him with me. They go on a plane with mom, and then the family unit's still together. They all had their due process. The kids were not deported. They simply went with the family unit, and they can come back with any legal adult at any time. So I don't know what the big deal is, right? All these people are getting their due process. And yes, they absolutely are getting their due process. Even if you're part of the whole Trinidad Illegal Enemies Act or whatever it is, they are all still getting their due process. It's just due process looks very different than a criminal trial, like I said. So, without beating that dead horse any farther, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Rush Slow Ball. We will catch you next time. And make sure you hit that like button to get your due process. Much love all.